think we might be live. I'm just going to wait until I get my confirmation of the computer in front of me. And yeah, great. We're doing it. Okay, fantastic. Well, this is wonderful. It's wonderful to be back. Hello, everybody. I haven't really planned much of what I'm going to be doing right now. I just figured I've just finished my exams. I'll explain where I've been and what I've been doing, but it's quite difficult to jump back in to doing YouTube and doing what I was doing all the time beforehand. So I figured that I'd jump in with a live stream, let you guys know what's going on, what I've been doing, as well as taking some questions, that kind of thing, but mainly because, you know, I've got a bunch of ideas and things that I've been coming up with, but I haven't really had a chance to formulate them, and so that's going to take a little bit of time. You know, I need to actually plan videos and create them and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to wait too long before I just did something to say hello, to sort of touch base. So, for those of you who don't know, I haven't uploaded I haven't uploaded since March at this point, I think, which is a stupidly long amount of time, if you ask me. It's really, I've missed it more than I can explain. The reason being is because I've had exams. I'm currently a student. I do A-levels, which I always find it difficult to explain this. I know the majority of the people watching now are going to be Americans. So I'm not entirely sure what the equivalent is there. I think it's basically the equivalent of the last few years of high school, because these are the exams which determine whether or not to get into university, effectively. So that's where I've been. I've been studying for those, and you may have seen a video, an update video I did a little while ago that basically explained that I had an offer from a university or two, and basically the grades that I get are going to determine whether or not I get in. It's done slightly differently here in the UK, I think, from the USA, because we get I've gotten the offer from the universities, which I guess would be college over there, I think someone's commenting, and then we sit the exams after we've got the offer, and then we wait I have to wait like 8 weeks now, then I'll get the results, and if I get the grades that I need, when I get those results, if they're the grades that I need, then I'll be accepted into the university. So it's a bit of a roundabout way of doing it, but what it means is that in about 8 weeks' time, I'll be able to tell you what the next 3 years of my life is going to look like, because I don't know, so I can't tell you, but it's going to determine, those grades are going to determine if I go to university, which university I go to, even what I'm going to be studying. So I don't want to talk too much about that now. The reason that I've been kind of ambiguous about where I'm going and what I'm studying is because people have a tendency to watch one of my videos. They might watch something like this, and then they'll see that I mention a particular course or a particular university, and then they don't see the update video, and so sort of it follows me until my dying day. You know, I'll keep getting emails about how I'm doing at this place when I'm not there, and it's just something that I wasn't really interested in doing. So I'm going to wait until I actually know what I'm doing before I let you know, and that will be in around about 8 weeks, like I say. I'm not sure entirely the date, sometime in August, but as soon as I know, I'll make some kind of update video letting you know. But it's really has been quite painful to be away, you know. I've just been sat at this desk, you know, studying as you do, and it feels so different now, because this time, even just a week ago, I was sat at this desk and I wasn't surrounded by my books that I've missed and my camera and my YouTube and Twitter and all this. I've just been surrounded by horrible, stupid textbooks that contain misinformation, and you know, it's not been fun. And if you followed me on Twitter, then you'll know that I haven't been much enjoying it. So I'm more than glad to be done. I suppose the next question is, how did the exams go? A lot of people have been asking me. Problem is, it's very difficult to do. I've just seen someone's asked which A-level subjects I do. They're all humanities, so I do philosophy. I did philosophy, sociology, which I regret just about as much as I regret anything else in my life, and I did politics. So the problem with that, I mean, the good part about that is that they're subjects I enjoy, they're subjects I can talk about, and in an essay format, it's fairly easy to sort of make things up, use contemporary examples. There's a lot of sort of room to maneuver there, but the problem is it's very, very difficult to know if you've actually done well, because yes, you can talk about this topic, but have you talked about it in the way that they want you to? My last ethics exam, which was my final exam last Monday, asked about free will and determinism, and everybody on Twitter was saying, well, that's great, I mean, I'm sure you did fantastically, but it's not just about being able to talk about free will and determinism. It's about being able to talk about particularly Augustine's or John Calvin's predestination theory, or particularly Pelagius and Arminius, or particularly Jean-Paul Sartre, or particularly Sam Harris doesn't get mentioned, for instance. So my reading of him is pretty useless for the topic. I mean, so it just makes it very difficult to know how I've done. So for those asking, I'm afraid to say I don't know. I suppose if it went horribly wrong, really, really terribly, then I would be able to tell you that I'm sure I failed, and that hasn't happened. So I suppose that's one good point. But honestly, I could have gotten D's, I could have gotten an F, an E, could have gotten an A star. I really couldn't tell you. But that's what's going to determine whether or not we get into uni and what the next 3 years of my life are going to look like. So that's where I've been, that's what I've been doing. Sorry it's not more exciting. But now I'm able to jump back in. So I've got a bunch of cool ideas, a bunch of cool projects that I want to get done that are coming up. But they are gonna take a little bit of time. The other thing I'm a little bit concerned about is the fact that I know that YouTube's algorithm can be a little bit questionable at times. It gets a lot of criticism, and I understand the criticism of the algorithm. Like I get it, but what it means is that if I haven't uploaded in, however many months it's been now since March, I have a feeling that when I start uploading again, YouTube isn't going to be recommending my videos as much as it was before, because it thinks that maybe I've gone and it wants to test if I'm still going to be getting any views. So it just means that it might take a little bit of time to get back up to where I was. But what that means, I suppose, is that it's more important now than ever, if it wasn't important enough already, to make sure you're subscribed, make sure you've hit the bell as well. If you don't follow me on Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, that's one way to just make sure that you don't miss anything. It's also just a kind of bit of shameless self-promotion, so be sure to do that if you haven't already. So I suppose that's basically the update. That's where I've been, and there's not really much else to say that's particularly interesting about what I've been doing. So I don't know, maybe I'll look at some of the comments that are coming through. Wow, there's quite a few. It's very difficult to keep track of some of these comments. But I'll try and pick out a few things and just have a general chat. So if you've got some questions, just pop them down. We'll see how this goes. I've seen someone's talking about my age, saying I'm 18. I'm 19 now. My birthday's in March. I'm 19 years old. When I started, I was 17, so I still get people thinking I'm still 17 for some reason. But no, 19 years old. So no, not 18. Yeah, okay, the draws. Books. Someone's asked, am I reading any new books? Well, the thing is, because I've been studying, I've been doing a hell of a lot of reading, but not reading anything that I actually want to read. So right now, I was thinking to myself, once I've finished exams, I'm going to have like a really good opportunity to just read a ton of books. And I was really excited. And the day after my final exam, I woke up and I thought to myself, great, I can read a book now. And I was just surrounded, but in my room I've got loads and loads of books, and I just had this kind of pluralist stagnation. I did not know where to start, and I still haven't really I haven't gotten into a book yet since finishing exams, which is weird. It's kind of because I just don't really know where to start, because there are so many books that I want to read. So nothing in particular at the moment, I'm afraid. I suppose kind of looking around at some of the books that I might be reading soon. I'm interested in reading Steven Pinker's new book. I went to an event with Steven Pinker and Stephen Fry in London, where he was talking about his new book called Enlightenment Now, which is effectively a defense of Enlightenment values, which he seems to think is sort of coming under threat at the moment from other ideas that are kind of criticizing the idea of Enlightenment progress and reason and science, kind of postmodernism, I suppose. So it's kind of a defense of that, which I'll be interested in reading, and I'm pretty sure that will be something that I'll be reading. So yeah, Drew says read Pinker. Alright, I'll read it. That's Genetically Modified Skeptic in the comments. If you guys don't already know of his videos, if you're not already subscribed, then you should immediately do so. Of course, he's been doing some really interesting stuff. He was on Talk Heathen the other day, which was interesting. I think he's a bit of a natural, so make sure you go and subscribe. You'll see him in the comments. No, I haven't met Stephen Fry. I only sort of saw him. It was because it was only Steven Pinker who was doing the book signing, and the queue was out the door anyway, but Stephen Fry kind of just got up and flew out the door before anybody got a chance to say anything. But I got a good view of him, I suppose. So, let's have a look here. What have we got? Someone asks, ever considering A podcast in the future, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I know a lot of people who do this kind of thing, who do YouTube or talk about philosophy or whatever. The natural one of the most natural formats for that is a podcast, just a long conversation with somebody. The problem is, um, it's difficult to make that sustainable. I don't know if I'd be able to continually and reliably get guests. I don't know if I'm suited to the sort of interview format that it almost takes. Um, I don't know if I'd have the time to be able to do it, all these kinds of things. So I think it's something that I'd probably do way in the future, like once I've finished education, once I've kind of, maybe I've had a career behind me and I've written a bunch of books and I've had my peak and now I'm kind of just need something to keep me going. Maybe then I'll do a podcast. Alternatively, if I end up not going to university, I might have a ton of extra time on my hands, in which case I might be able to start a podcast. So it really kind of all depends on what's going to happen in 8 weeks. So questions about like the future of the channel are going to be very difficult to answer for now. So yes. Any speaking engagements over the summer? Gosh, I'm trying to think. Nothing that I've got off the top of my head. I think there's a few things that I've got lining up. But that's one thing I often get people emailing me about coming to speak in certain areas. I'm always happy to speak practically anywhere in the world, to be honest with you, so long as expenses can be covered. I mean, that's it. So if you have like a humanist society, like a local humanist society or a atheist group or a philosophy, something or other, some kind of organization that you think would be willing to host me and have the ability to get me out there through whatever means they want to, I'm always happy to do it. So if you are able to do that or able to speak to a society like that, just send me an email, and I'm always happy to speak anywhere. So that just reminded me, people often ask in emails like, are you going to come here? And it's like, well, I'd love to, but you just need an invite, that's all. These are coming quite fast. The last time I did this, the last time I did a live stream, I was with my friend Lloyd Evans. You guys probably know him. And he was moderating and doing the comments, and gosh, I've got to say, I really should start using a moderator more when I'm doing live streams, because it's very difficult to sort of keep on top of these things. Music taste. Okay, well, that's interesting. I used to be way more into music than I am now. Music used to kind of be all I wanted to do. I play the guitar, and I was in bands and stuff, and I really, really loved it. And I don't do that so much anymore, but my music taste kind of stayed the same from those days. So I listen to basically a lot of classic rock, so 70s stuff. So Led Zeppelin is one of my favorite bands of all time. I don't know, Pink Floyd, Guns N' Roses when I was much younger. That was great. The typical stuff. Hendrix. It's almost boring. Just think of your kind of stereotypical 70s rock music, and that's basically what I'd be listening to. Okay. Gorillas, yeah, gorillas are cool. I like them. Not as much like as some of the other people, but I mean, yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah, and that reminds me actually, I have a second YouTube channel, as apart from this one. So, trying to think how you find. If you go onto my channel, if you go onto the Cosmic Skeptic channel, on the right hand side, there's a few channels that I recommend, and one of them is my second channel. If I ever do anything musically, like I've written songs and I've recorded music and stuff, they're all on there. There's not much on there at the moment, but the stuff that does exist is on there. And if I do stuff in the future, that's where it's going to end up. So, if you're interested in any of the music stuff that I've been doing, then yeah, check it out there. Okay. Am I still unconvinced of objective morality, says Andy Chamberlain Music. Okay, well, I mean, yes. Let me just make sure I've got this question right. I don't want to answer your question wrong. Yeah, okay, yes. I remain unconvinced that objective morality exists. Simply because I obviously, it goes without saying, I don't believe in any kind of divine command morality type stuff. I don't believe in supernatural morality. So the only way that there can be a concept of morality is if it comes from nature. In that sense, you could call me a naturalist, I suppose. However, the the one kind of way that I've seen people get around this when they want to defend objective morality but don't believe in God is they use the Sam Harris well-being argument. I mean, that's basically the most popular form. My friend Stephen, Rationality Rules, subscribes to it. We had a big conversation with it, and I basically stand by everything I said. I sort of subscribe to the idea that G.E. Moore had about how good is just an undefinable concept. It doesn't have any synonyms. You know, the moment that you try to define good by assigning it a natural quality, like well-being, you know, and this is basically what Sam Harris tries to do. And what I think that's why I think he's redefining morality rather than kind of defining morality. But the problem with doing that is that if you say that good is whatever is conducive to well-being, then you've got a problem because, for instance, if you're going to say good is what is conducive to well-being, then that sentence, if they mean the same thing, then that sentence can also be rendered as whatever is conducive to well-being is conducive to well-being, right? That's the same sentence because good just means that, so that means the same thing. But you've kind of got no, you haven't got any normative function in that. There's nothing about saying, you know, what is conducive to well-being is what is conducive to well-being. That's the same as saying what is good is what is conducive to well-being if you define good as what is conducive to well-being. And so it doesn't mean anything. It still doesn't explain why we should care about that, right? You can know, you can keep asking, you can keep asking questions and questions and questions after questions, such as if someone says that well-being is what is good, then I say, well, why is well-being good? They say, well, because well-being makes us happy. But why is being happy good? Well, because I suppose happy makes us well-being. No, I can't do that because that would make it circular. So they say, well, I suppose being happy helps us to survive because it keeps our optimism up to, you know, work in a community and survive as a species. Okay, why is that good? And you can keep asking this question. And sure, subjectively, you can say that, well, it feels good. Fair enough. No problem with that. But you just can't say as an objective fact that morality exists. Especially because if you think about what objectivity is, objectivity means independent of human emotion. If I say that something is objective fact, it means that it would be fact if every human mind instantly dissolved and disappeared. It would still be a fact. That's what objective means. But if morality is a product of emotion and the human mind, then that can't be said to still exist independently of the human mind. That doesn't make any sense. So to me, it's not just a problem that I'm unconvinced with some of the proposals for objective secular morality that I've seen, but I don't think that there can be a successful one because I don't see how something like morality, which ultimately, as far as I can tell, is just an emotive instinct. You know, it contains no truth value in an objective sense. I don't see a way that can be made objective. And even if there was some divine origin of morality, you're still left with a host of problems. You guys have probably heard of things like the Euthyphro dilemma. The idea that, you know, if what is good is what God commands, is it good because God commands it, or does God command it because it is good? And each of those has its own problems. And also, it still doesn't necessarily imply why you should follow the direction of God. Because there's a difference, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot while I've been gone, because I haven't spoken about this before, and I've realised it recently. Even if you could know what is good objectively, that's not the same as knowing that you should do it. Because even if you manage somehow to find an objective way of proving that this is good, can you objectively show that we ought to do what is good? I mean, that's a whole nother level. You've still got a ton of work to do, right? Because there's one thing to know what's good, it's another thing to be able to prove that we ought to do what's good. Who's to say that? Why ought we not do what is evil? Again, you could make subjective arguments, but you couldn't say it. You couldn't ground that in objective fact. It would have to be based on subjective emotions. Now, I have no problem with this because, let's say, for instance, I'll give you an analogy. Let's say that we're deciding how we should paint the walls of a room. And you and I are having a discussion, and we don't know which colour to paint it. Now, subjectively, we both just happen to agree, maybe for different reasons, but we both subjectively happen to agree that orange is the best colour for a wall. I don't know why we think that, but let's just presume that we did, subjectively. And we don't have to explain our reasons, because we agree. And so what we can do is, when we're painting the wall, we can treat it as though it's objectively true that orange is the best colour for a wall, because we both agree. So it's as if it's subjective, because we both subjectively agree. Now, he might think orange is the best colour because he thinks God says that orange is the best colour, and I might think it just because I have an evolutionary trait to be attracted to orange colours. Now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that we both subjectively agree, and therefore we can treat it as though it's subjective, and we can say that it is factual that we should paint the wall orange, right? So it's not objective, even though we both agree. Now, the same thing goes for morality. I think well-being is a good thing, and so do you, presumably. So does everybody. And so we can treat morality as though it's subjective, because we can say that, well, we both subjectively value well-being, and we can show that this objectively improves well-being. Therefore, we can treat this action as though it is objectively good, but it's not. So on a practical level, objective morality can kind of make sense as a concept because we can treat it as though it's objective. But on a philosophical level, which is, you know, what I'm interested in, there's just no way to ground moral concepts in morality. As far as I'm concerned, they are just emotional constructs. And especially, and I don't want to overcomplicate things, and I kind of want to move on here, but just remember the fact that I don't believe in free will, or actively disbelieve in free will. I mean, if you haven't seen my video on that, you should watch it. A lot of people have had some objections on that, which none of them have been particularly challenging as far as I can see so far. I might do a video sort of responding to some of them, but once you throw that into the mix, morality as a concept just completely disintegrates. Absolutely makes no sense. The idea of praise, the idea of shame, the idea of good and evil, the idea of guilt, all of these things just disappear when free will does not exist. Okay, so morality is this huge topic. I mean, I could write a book on the topic, you know, there's so much to say on it. But the one thing I can say conclusively is that I'm certainly unconvinced that it can be grounded in objectivity in any sense. Okay, super chat. My God, you know, man, this super chat thing, like, it's crazy. Like, I get, obviously, there's a lot of comments and people want their comments to be seen, but like, I appreciate it, you know, I appreciate the super chats. I've just realised I might have missed some super chats that have gone by without me noticing while I've been talking to the camera, so I'm really sorry if I've done that. Hopefully there's a way that I can see them all at the end. I'm not too sure. I'll see what I can do. But we've got two here. One of them's asking about advice for setting up a skepticism channel like mine. Well, I mean, it's complimentary of you to sort of presume that I would know a thing or two about doing YouTube. As far as I'm concerned, the majority of the successes that I've seen on YouTube have been down to luck. Although I do think that luck involves, obviously luck is opportunity, but you need to be ready for that opportunity. So there are certain things you can do to prepare. The first thing is you just got to actually start making videos. I mean, for goodness sake, like, and the main hurdle for that is usually equipment. People are worried about equipment. I'm doing this right now. This is on a phone because it's much easier than doing it through the computer, and I still haven't figured out how it works. So I'm using my phone, not a microphone or anything. The light I'm using right now is like a normal desk lamp, and I do have my softbox and my camera. You can see them behind me, but I'm not using them right now. And some of you might not have even really noticed. You might not have thought, like, oh, the quality's a bit bad today. You might not have noticed. And if you didn't, I think that says something about how you can kind of get away with using anything, you know, these days, so to speak. So if you watch some of my earlier videos, I used to use my phone to film my videos in general. Then the first thing I got was a light, so it lit me up. Then I got a microphone. Then I got a camera, because you kind of got to fill in the gaps, you know. If you've got a camera, you don't need to buy a better camera if you still haven't got anything in the way of lighting or audio. Okay, so equipment-wise, you know, fill in the gaps before you improve the quality, I suppose is what I'm saying. Be ready for criticism. I mean, really, like, be ready for emails of hate, but also be ready for emails of love. Like, that can be overwhelming, you know. You don't really consider the fact that people are going to be commenting and emailing you with these incredibly nice comments. Most of which I do read, by the way. If you've ever sent me anything that I haven't responded to, the chances are I have read it, but certainly with exams going on over the past few months, I haven't had a chance to respond. But that's one of the things. You kind of have to be ready for a pretty packed inbox, and plan from the start. Like set up a separate email address, set up a different social media account if you want to, and that kind of thing. So. But logistically, I mean, what people are really looking for when they ask for advice with YouTube is how to get views. One piece of advice I probably have is don't be ashamed to do things like grow the channel or to make money or to network. Like, it's something that you just need to do. I don't understand. Like, if I tell you all now to go and follow me on Twitter, like I did at the beginning of this video, go and do that. Some people will be like, oh, just promoting himself. Well, yes. I mean, that's what you do. That's how you grow. Do you think I'm doing that because I want to be popular? No, I'm doing it because to grow an audience means that you're talking to more people and more people are hearing your message, right? So there's no shame in doing that. And it's the same thing with things like making money. Like, don't worry about like setting up a Patreon. Don't think that people are gonna like, because I thought that it would be a bit presumptuous, but I've realized that that's what's made me able to make more videos, which is what people obviously want if they're supporting me on Patreon. So don't worry about that, just say what you've got to say, and also don't necessarily think you have to agree with other people who are in your field. If you're looking, because you say like skepticism channel like mine, as if, because there are channels that are like mine, people like me and Holy Kool-Aid and Rationality Rules and GM Skeptic and all these people, similar type videos, but don't feel like you have to agree with us. Say what you have to say, and just put it out there independently. In fact, if you don't have some kind of independent thought, then nobody's probably going to subscribe to you. But just also be ready to pounce on the luck that you get, because to have a successful channel probably does require some preparation and skill, I suppose. But it also requires luck, so you need to just be ready for that luck. When you get that one video that gets slightly more views than normal, it gets 700 instead of 300, that's when you need to pounce. That means that there are more people than usual, and you need to get them to subscribe. You need to put out another video like the next day. Get right on it. Just always be ready to pounce on that luck, and share around Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, wherever you can. Just learn, like go on YouTube and do some like courses in advertising and marketing and how to like spread your message. There are some very simple videos, just give you like basic tips about how to get people to watch, how to title your videos, that kind of thing. But I suppose those are the main tips that I would have. I was trying to say that there was another super chat that came up a while ago. It's now gone, but I didn't want to miss it. And if I remember, it was asking about, it was from a Catholic, asking what was the best argument against Catholicism. Now, it's difficult to say. You can't really quantify these arguments very well. It's very difficult to say which is the best, because it's kind of different for every person, because it depends what you mean by best. You might mean like the most damning in general, like statistically, which has had the worst effect on people like leaving the church. But then for you personally, it might be just that one particular argument that resonated with you in a certain way that took you out. And I'm trying to think what it might have been for me, particularly with the Catholic Church. For me, I suppose a lot of what made me really dislike the Catholic Church in particular was certain inconsistencies. Like with the contraceptives policy, which I've written about on my blog. I have done a video on it actually, but I've also written about it on my blog, cosmicskeptic.com. Again, there you go with the promotion. The inconsistency in, like, for instance, take the abortion policy. Now, there is a very strong philosophical case to be made for being pro-life. No problem with that. But you can't be pro-life and be anti-contraceptives. I mean, that is just an inconsistency in terms of practicality, right? If you're going to say that you can't use contraceptives because it prevents the possibility of life, or it goes against the natural order, and you're basically using the same justifications for condemning abortion, then you've got a problem, because you're sort of putting them on the same moral level and implying something along the lines of like contraceptives is murder. That's the kind of logic that you end up when you do the reductio ad absurdum. When you take it to the extreme and you see where the logic leads, that's where you end up, and it's a little bit questionable. Also, of course, like the organizational structure. I mean, put it this way, right? If Jesus existed and existed as he is portrayed in the Bible, do you think that he would approve of the Vatican? Do you think that he would approve of the hierarchical and organized structure of the Catholic Church? I mean, do you really think that he would like that? I mean, this is the man who said, you know, go, sell all you own and give to the poor, for you will find treasure in heaven. I think that was the Gospel of... I'm pretty sure that's Mark 10:21, something like that. It is easier for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God than it is for a... No, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Notice what that's saying there. That's Mark 10:25. Notice what that's saying. It's not saying like something like, what is it, 1 Timothy 6:10 that says, the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, stolen from a Greek cynic a long time ago, by the way, who said the same thing. But anyway, that's saying, you know, the love of money. So greed, effectively, is the root of all kinds of evil. But what Mark is saying in his gospel is that just being rich, just having money, is enough to keep you out of the kingdom, right? So look at the Vatican, look at the Bible with scriptures like that, and just see if they work out. So you've kind of got two problems there with the Catholic Church. One is that by my secular standards, it's an abominable organization. But even by the standards of Jesus Christ, you know, it's not particularly consistent with his teaching. So I suppose that would be the main argument, and that's what I would put to a Catholic anyway. Because of course, if you're talking to a Catholic, that Catholic believes in Jesus, believes in the Bible, and so I would say, how would you explain that inconsistency? How do you reconcile these not just anti-greed or anti-love of wealth, but anti-wealth, anti-money verses with the extreme wealth of the Vatican? Okay, yes, they give to charity, fine, but not as much as they could. Remember, Jesus didn't just say, you know, sell a bit and then build a castle. He said, sell all that you own and give to the poor, for you will find treasures in heaven. I think that it seems to me that the Catholic Church treasures seem suspiciously earthly. No, Everyday Skeptic. No, is it bad that I haven't heard of them? No, I haven't. Although I'll make a note. I'll tell you what, I'll make a note right now. Yeah. Always looking for new information, you see. Great. Okay, a lot of people asking about Jordan Peterson. Yes, Memento Ruin. Thank you for the $5. Much appreciated. Asks, you guys might have heard Jordan Peterson has said, if you haven't watched Jordan Peterson's conversation with Matt Dillahunty, you should watch it, because as I've explained a moment ago, probably more depth than you wanted, I don't agree with Matt Dillahunty about the idea of objective morality. So I don't agree with what Matt Dillahunty was saying when he was arguing with Jordan Peterson, but I certainly didn't agree with what Jordan Peterson was saying either naturally, right? So it's a good debate to watch because they both highlight each other's flaws very well, even though I don't fully agree with either of them, if you see what I'm saying. But one thing that Jordan Peterson did that I can't let go is he said to Matt Dillahunty that most people who say they're atheists aren't really atheists. He says, or at least they act like they believe in God. And so Matt says, well, what would a real atheist look like? And Jordan Peterson said, well, like Raskolnikov. As in, if you're an atheist, if you're a real atheist and you're consistent, you'd be a mass murderer. Now, okay, fair enough. Now, don't get me wrong. This provokes a lot of outrage, and I understand why it should. But we have to be level-headed here. Don't just immediately think, how dare you? Because, like, come on, that's exactly the kind of thing that a religious person might do when you say that God doesn't exist. They might say, how dare you? Well, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's think about this philosophically. Okay, what does he mean? He seems to be making sort of 2 points. First is one about nihilism. He's saying that if you're an atheist, then you have to be consistent, you have to be a nihilist. Now, I see the philosophical case for this, but only in the sense that if we take nihilism to just mean a sort of belief that there is no purpose, you know, that kind of nihilism, then what we're looking at is a situation where, yes, there is no objective meaning. And so if that's what you mean by you have to be nihilistic to be consistent with your atheism, then absolutely, okay, fine, there is no objective purpose. Or I don't want to say that for certain, but you know what I mean. It seems my worldview does not have a necessity for objective purpose. That doesn't mean that subjective purpose can't exist. Now, obviously that's a bit cheap, saying that, well, I make my own purpose. I read books and listen to music. Okay, great, fine. That I struggle to sort of say that that is meaning and purpose, just because those words seem so heavy. They seem to imply like an objective kind of meaning. I just want to check that I've seen these super chats before they go away. Note them down. Jeez. Okay. Bear with me. Just going to make a quick note because I want to make sure I don't miss any of these. So I'm probably not going to remember the names of the people who said these because I'm just making a quick scribble. Although to Nathan, who's asked if I'm at uni, I'm not at uni yet. I explained this at the beginning of the video. If you rewind and watch from the beginning, I explain where I've been and what's going on with the university. You ask about like societies and things. That I'll let you know when I get there, basically. Oh, and a nice, wow, 20 euros from Super Curious. Thank you so much. Okay, so where was I with Jordan Peterson? Yeah, I find it a bit cheap to basically say that you can kind of make your own meaning. Okay, if that works for you, that works for you. It doesn't work for me, because to me, the words meaning and purpose have such weight to them that they imply a certain level of objectivity, right? So that doesn't make sense to me. But basically, I see it in a kind of practical sense, you've got to kind of understand my worldview as a holistic image, right? I don't believe in free will. I don't believe in objective morality. I don't believe in objective purpose. What does this all mean when you put it together? It means that we are just we're just molecules in motion. It seems we're just atoms. We're just advanced breeds of apes. We are objectively as of worth as a tree waving in the wind. In an objective sense. However, by definition, you can't ignore subjectivity. Okay, so as long as I recognize that the enjoyment that I have and the meaning that I experience is subjective, as long as I'm able to recognize that on a philosophical level, I can get by, If we were able to ignore that subjective side, then maybe Jordan Peterson's right, that atheists, if they really were consistent, would just be nihilists and murderers and all kill themselves because there is no objective purpose. But Peterson is making the assumption there that we all always think objectively and that it is possible to ignore subjectivity, which is not possible to do. Now, someone like Peterson, his worldview is based on what he perceives to be objectivity. He thinks that, he sees morality in an objective sense, for instance. And so he thinks that without morality and without that kind of objectivity, there is no morality, there is no purpose, because he's ignoring the kind of subjective element of that all. And so that's how an atheist can still be consistent, so to speak, and not kill themselves. It's a practical thing. It's like, why don't you kill yourself? Well, because I've got work in the morning. That kind of thing. It's not a philosophically strong case. It's just a practical one. Maybe Peterson's right on a philosophical level, but he's wrong on a kind of factual level. I mean, clearly there are many people who don't believe in God and don't murder. I saw Penn Jillette answer this well. He said, look, I'm often told, and this is what Peterson seems to sort of be implying, if there is no God, then I could rape and murder as many people as I like. And he said, and you know what? I have. I've raped and murdered as many people as I've wanted to, and that number is exactly 0. And that's the point. On a factual basis, on a practical level, you can be a consistent atheist and not be a nihilist, although on a philosophical level, perhaps nihilism really is the consistent position. But that's something that needs some philosophical exploration, and it can't ignore subjectivity. It really can't, and that's what Peterson seems to be doing with this mistake. And also, I find it hard to take Peterson seriously after that discussion he had with Sam Harris about the meaning of truth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you want a 2-hour-long headache, go to Sam Harris's podcast and listen to the first podcast that he did with Jordan Peterson. And that is the moment that I decided that I wasn't in Jordan Peterson's corner. Up until then, I hadn't really seen much of what he'd said. I'd heard about him. I've read about 70% of his new book, which is interesting. A lot of practical wisdom, some practical silliness, some interesting biblical analysis, some ridiculous biblical analysis. Worth a read, I suppose, just for the sake that it's been so consequential. But it was at that moment when I actually watched that, that conversation with Sam Harris that I realised, okay, yeah, no, this guy has some serious errors in his philosophical thinking, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I'm not going to say that objectively. Wow. To Nala, I don't know if that's your real name or a screen name, but messages like that are, well, that's exactly the kind of, that's what I was talking about earlier, about the kind of messages that you never expect to get. That really does mean a lot. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for the 10 euros. That's amazing. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson, the problem is Jordan Peterson kind of rose to fame, or rose to real fame, while I was doing exams. So I could watch some things that he was doing. I couldn't sit down and watch like really long discussions. I really want to watch his like biblical series, for instance. But I just haven't had the chance, so I might get a chance. But also, like, not being funny, that many of the things that I would say about Jordan Peterson, or want to say about Jordan Peterson, have already been said very, very well. Again, my friend Stephen, Rationality Rules, has made a fantastic video series on Jordan Peterson. I mean, you might not find all of it convincing, you might find some flaws in what he has to say, but he certainly makes a very, very strong case against Peterson's epistemology, and I'd recommend you go and watch it. You can probably find it just by searching Rationality Rules Jordan Peterson. He's made, like, I think maybe 3 or 4 videos at this point on different aspects of Jordan Peterson's philosophy, and he's done such a good job that I don't feel particularly compelled to add to it, unless I think of anything particularly different from what he's saying. Then I'll do it. But I think he's done such a fantastic job that I'd recommend I just have to refer you there, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Let's have a look. Now, okay, a lot of people talking about the draws. Can I just clear something up here? I said in a video a little while ago that at 100,000 subscribers I would bring back the draws, and people keep telling me, Alex, you've hit 100,000 subscribers. Where are the draws? Well, I did bring back the draws at 100,000 subscribers. I did a live stream at 100,000 subscribers, and then the live stream cut out, and then I brought it back in again with the draws. And that second part of the live stream didn't stay up. You know, the first part of the live stream did, the second part didn't. So the draws were there, but only if you were there. So, you know, if you're the one complaining about not having the draws at 100,000 subscribers, well, you know, where were you at the celebration is all I can say. Maybe for 200,000, I'll see what I can do. Jeez. Book suggestions. Book suggestions. This is one of the most popular questions I get. What books do I recommend? Okay, go on YouTube and actually no, you can't do that. I have a video that is called Books You Should Read, and it's my sort of fundamental basic book recommendations. I recognise a lot of people have watched that and have already read like most or all of those books. So I might do an update soon. Again, I don't want to sort of say anything off the top of my head. There are just so many books, obviously. But I might do an update. Follow me on Goodreads if you're that interested. Basically, on Goodreads, I started using it fairly recently, so it's not accurate in terms of what I've read in the past. But if I'm reading a book now, or if I'm reading it again or something, I'll say that I'm reading it on Goodreads. So it's not necessarily a good representation of everything that I've read, but it's a good representation of what I'm reading right now and what I'm into. So if you're interested in what I'm reading, goodreads.com/Cosmic Skeptic, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, I can't tell you how much I've missed this. You know, it's really like, man, it's so much fun doing this kind of stuff. It's so much fun being on YouTube and getting comments and talking with you guys. So I'm really glad to be back. Oh yeah, I had some super chats from earlier. One person asked about how I stay so reasonable when talking about frustrating topics. First, that's a compliment, so thank you. You know, it's just a situational thing. You know, it's not going to be helpful if you don't stay reasonable, if you don't stay rational, if you don't keep your head on your shoulders. You know, if you start getting angry or frustrated, what do you expect to get out of that? You know, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's kind of just a practical thing. I mean, I do get frustrated. Don't get me wrong. You know, I tweeted about this the other day, how I'm always talking about free will. always, I've had so many discussions just this week about free will, and they get so frustrating, and they're really, really difficult to get through, but at the same time, I completely understand. And it's not like it's their fault, right? So, you know, it's just a practical thing. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't stay reasonable, so that's kind of what it is. I had another super chat asking if I can do a video about like the burden of proof. I've mentioned it a lot in other videos that I've done, so I'm not sure that I'll make a video particularly on it, because I think it's a fairly simple concept that can be tackled fairly easily. I'm pretty sure I will have talked about it in my early videos on broad topics, like probably some of my like response videos for the teleological argument and stuff. So if you're interested, you could check those out. What are my thoughts? This is another super chat from Ryan. Thank you, Ryan, for $10. That's very kind of you. What are your thoughts on psychedelics with the study of consciousness and also its relation to spiritual atheism? Okay, well, honestly, I don't know. I'd have to plead ignorance. I haven't actually. I've been meaning to read sort of Sam Harris's writings on the spirituality side of atheism, which I think, I don't know how I feel about that. It depends what you mean by spiritual, really. You know, in my country, in the UK, the British Social Attitude Survey in I think last year, 2017, reported for the first time that 53% of the population have no religion. You know, that's huge. However, a lot of people, whilst they're not saying that they're religious, are now saying that they're spiritual. Now, I don't know what to think of that, because it depends on what you mean by spiritual. It's one of these words that can basically mean anything you want it to, so I don't know how I feel about spiritual atheism. If by spiritual atheism you mean atheism that isn't nihilism, then, like, I've just spoken about that if you weren't here, like, okay, fine, do your thing. If you mean spiritual atheism as in, yeah, I don't believe in God, but I believe there's something, like, okay, what do you mean? I had this conversation, I was on a live stream once, I think it was Lloyd's live stream. I was talking to Lloyd Evans, my good friend of mine, and he said, I think he'd said, you know, I still, because he really likes Sam Harris, he's been influenced by Sam Harris, and I think he said something along the lines of, you know, I don't believe in God, but I'm still spiritual, and I just said, well, you know, have you ever really thought about what that means? Like, what do you mean by spiritual? And he said, to his credit, he kind of said, well, actually, you know what, I haven't really thought about that, so and we've talked about it more since then, but it's one of those things, like, what do you actually mean by spiritual, you know? And some people know exactly what they mean, but in my experience, it's been a minority. Most people just use that as kind of a cop-out. It's like, well, you know, I'm unconvinced that there's a God, but I'm not quite ready to admit that we're alone in the universe and there's no objective purpose, so I'm spiritual. You know, that's what it seems to be to me, which doesn't work for me, but if it works for you, then it works for you. I don't know what psychedelics do for that, honestly. I'd imagine that, like I was saying about earlier, how things like this are based on subjectivity, and I would imagine that psychedelics have a serious effect on your subjective experience. Of course they do. They have no influence whatsoever on objective existence, so it kind of depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about the spirituality in terms of the existence objectively of a spirit, or the existence of something beyond the human mind in terms of consciousness, then no, I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever. However, if you mean on a subjective level, then I'm afraid to say that just depends on the person, really. You know, you can't really talk objectively about the subjective very well. So Ryan has suggested maybe spiritual atheism is accepting divinity in the universe as a whole. Even that seems quite broad. I mean, if by divinity you mean some kind of supernatural power, then okay, you can believe that, but I wouldn't call you an atheist, because it would depend on your terminology. I don't particularly care what you call yourself, I care what you believe. So if you believe that there's a supernatural force, if you want to call that atheism or you don't, fine, but let's talk about that as a contained subject, you know. So yeah, I mean, call it what you want. It depends what you mean by divinity, you know. Most people by divinity mean supernaturalism, and if that's what you mean, then I'm unconvinced that supernaturalism is real, that there is a supernatural. I won't say there objectively isn't, I just would say that I'm unconvinced. So if that's what you mean by spiritual atheism, then I can't buy it, I'm afraid. Okay, so I feel obliged I feel obliged to answer super chat questions, and one of them has asked, "What's the best Shrek movie?" Now, let's think about this. I've spent a lot of time talking about how morality and experience and purpose and meaning are entirely subjective enterprises. You didn't ask what do I think is the best Shrek movie. You asked what is the best Shrek movie. You see, on a philosophical level, I'm afraid to say that question is unanswerable. It's like asking what's the meaning of life. You can't do it. If you're talking about the subjective experience, it depends on the individual person. But on an objective level, it doesn't make sense as a question, and so you can't be doing it. It's not like if you ask what's the best Star Wars movie, in which case objectively it's Episode 5. It's an entirely subjective enterprise. It depends on the person, and it's something that I haven't watched in a very long time. So I'm afraid to say that I can't satisfactorily answer your question. However, I felt obliged because it was a super chat. So thanks, I think. Let's see here. Yeah, I should really get a moderator. I'm sure this is very fun to just sit and watch me read. Okay. One of the basic skepticism. Okay, here we go. Super chat. One of the. Thank you for the $10. Christ. One of the basics of skepticism is to reject claims without evidence. That said, how should we approach news stories? Oh, okay, I see. Well, the same way that you'd approach any claim as a skeptic when it comes to news stories. Read different news sources. It was bizarre when I was in Los Angeles. I was watching somebody give a talk at a conference, and it was wonderful. But there was one thing that they said that I just couldn't get over, and they said something like, they were dissing on Fox News as they do in America, and they said, because of that, someone asked what news source do you use, and they said, well, Fox News is garbage, so it's just CNN, and the audience is like, yeah, great. Well, no, come on, okay, just think about this, right? If you are listening or watching just a single news source, and that includes reading the same newspaper or watching the same news source or just using Facebook, for instance, you will be informed. You will know what's going on in the world, and if that's all you're looking for, then fine. But you have to understand that your opinions are likely not going to be as fleshed out as they could be. It seems to have been somewhat disproven, the idea that I think I froze for a second. Bear with me. It seems to have been somewhat disproven, the idea that that the media can really, really sort of influence, like the hypodermic needle theory, that it just kind of throws into you these opinions. I don't buy that. But what I do think is that in order to have an opinion, you need to be informed. Otherwise, your opinion is a garbage opinion, probably. I mean, why have an opinion if it's just based on one source? Your opinion has basically been manufactured then. And so, when you approach a news source, check it against other news sources. Check it against what you think is reasonable. Check it against what biases you think a news source might have. In the UK, I suppose in the US, the main thing is news about Donald Trump. Just pay attention. If there is a story about Trump in the New York Times or on CNN, just consider the fact that there's going to be a left-wing bias. All right, and you've got two ways to get around that. You can either try and find a source that you think is neutral and objective, and you'll immediately fail because that doesn't exist. So the only real way to get around it is listen to a biased source one way, listen to a biased source the other way, and whatever they agree on is probably the actual facts, right? That's one way of doing it. I try and read different newspapers, although, I myself tend to just read the Times more than anything. We all kind of have that one station that we go to because we enjoy the way they present information, and that's fine as long as you can recognize that if you're basing opinions on what you've read or listened to or seen in the media, and you're only using one source of media, that you are informed, but your opinions are probably not as fleshed out as they could be. Another super chat. Thank you so much for the €10. Hello, Alex. What is the distinction between agency and free will if you do make one? Well, look, here's the thing, okay? Free will. Let's not get too deep into this, but let's have a look. So, there is clearly a difference between jumping and being pushed. Right? That goes without saying. Experientially, just on an experiential basis, if there were no difference, if there really wasn't a difference between jumping and being pushed, then nobody would claim the experience of free will. And so there is a difference. And the difference is purely experiential. On a philosophical level, there is no difference between jumping and being pushed. So basically, this is kind of the soft determinist case, that we can still have free will, the compatibilist case, if you will, that we still have free will, because although everything's determined, it's determined by our own brains, and therefore the causes inside us, and we can just call that free will. If that's what you want to call free will, I suppose that's what you might be referring to there as agency, then okay, fine. But if what you mean by free will is to be the author of all of your actions, then that doesn't solve the problem. So basically, when you're making a decision, and your free will, when you're making a decision and you're doing it, I'd really recommend here, if you're going to listen to this piece, then listen to or watch my video that I've done on free will, the last one I did actually before now, because I don't want to get into that here, but if you have seen that, you'll understand what I'm saying here. If every action you do is based on what you want, is governed by your wants and desires, then what that means is that when you make a choice, you are acting in accordance with your desires. When you're pushed, you're not. An external force is causing you to do something. When you act with your wants, an internal cause is forcing you to do something in the same respect. But because it's internal, the experience is different. Even though on a philosophical level there's no difference, it feels different. Because although they're both caused, one is caused by your brain, and so you feel like it's you. One is caused by the environment, and so you feel like it's not. And that's the difference between agency and free will. Purely experiential. No philosophical difference, but just an experiential difference. But an important one, Okay. I'm not sure how long I'll be. I probably won't be here for much longer. I only plan to sort of go for an hour, but I do these things and I end up just talking and talking. It's basically all that I'm good at. Sorry, it's very difficult to wade through these things. Okay, yeah, I've seen a few people asking, like I see you asking, why don't I believe in free will? Watch the video that I've made on free will if you're interested in my views, or read Sam Harris's book, or read Bertrand Russell on it. Basically, I've heard a lot of objections since I did that free will video, based on the idea that I said that you can't change your wants, you can't change your desires. A lot of people have trouble with that. They say things like, but I used to smoke and I decided to give up, so I decided to not want to smoke. And they think that kind of takes the wind out of the sail. But in order to change that want, if you were capable of changing your wants, then you'd need to want to change that want, right? So it's still governed by wants that arise within you. So yes, you may have smoked and now you don't, but you needed to want to stop smoking. You needed to want to stop wanting a cigarette, right? And so ultimately you're still not in control. It's not. I saw somebody say things like, bollocks, am I controlled by my wants? Can I not change my wants? I mean, sometimes I want to set my dog on an annoying person, but I don't. What are you talking about, cosmic skeptic? And it kind of escapes people. Look, if you want to set your dog on someone who's annoying, but you don't, the reason you don't is because you don't want to harm them. You don't want to be arrested, right? And that want not to be arrested is stronger than the want to set your dog on them. If the want to set your dog on them was stronger, then you would set your dog on them, right? So you're still being governed by want. It's not a simple case of either you want to do something or you don't, and that's what determines your actions. All I'm saying is that everything you do is governed by your wants. It's a very complex system of wants, because your wants entail wanting to stay within the law, wanting to, please yourself and find comfort and well-being. It's wanting to abide by social obligation. It's wanting in the sense of urges that you don't control. It's all these kinds of things, and it's very, very complicated, very, very complicated business, really. But ultimately, I simplify it with my analogies so that you can understand the conceptual point that I'm making. But it just applies when you stretch it out. It applies on a more complex level. It makes it easier to talk in terms of two wants competing, but in practical sense, it's like hundreds and thousands of wants that you couldn't possibly. And that's another thing. There are so many complex wants going on in your mind that even if you could control your wants, you couldn't possibly even be aware of what all of your wants are. That can't happen. You can become aware of as many as you can, but life is so complicated, including the unconscious wants that you have, that by nature of them being unconscious, you can't be conscious of them. So it just doesn't make any sense, these objections, I'm afraid to say. Hello, Canada. Oh, hey, we've got some cool people in the comment section. Professor Stick is with us. Welcome, welcome. GM Skeptic's still here, asking me to collab. Drew, if you ever think I'm going to collab with you, I don't know what you're thinking of. Amazing. Gregory Simon says, life is too short to waste it thinking all the time. Go on holiday, do some travelling. Well, I will be. I'm going on holiday next week, so I know I've just got back. So I'm going to try and do some videos in anticipation of being away for another week. So hopefully you won't notice that I'm gone, but if there is another week after this one where you don't see anything from me, that'll be why. But again, if that's going to be the case, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. That's where it's going to be. Even through exams when I couldn't upload videos, any thoughts that I had on things like Jordan Peterson, which people have been asking about like crazy in this stream. Twitter's been where I've been talking about this stuff, so that's where you've got to go. Interesting. Thoughts on apologists' evidence of Jesus' empty tomb. So, this is one of the one of the main arguments for the historicity of Jesus is the empty tomb story, right? So, if you read. There are certain things in the gospel stories which seem to imply that there must have been some truth to the story. One of the best, I suppose, that you could use is, for instance, so the ancient Jewish historian Josephus said that a woman's testimony is not worth the same as a man's, right? Now, in the resurrection narratives, it varies by gospel, but take, say, John's gospel. Mary Magdalene is the one who discovers the empty tomb. So, if this story was made up, they would have had a man go and find the tomb in the story, right, to give it more credibility. They wouldn't have a woman do that, because a woman's testimony isn't worth anything, right? So people say, well, if the story was made up, they would have made it a man. Only if the story was actually true would they admit, so to speak, that it was a woman who discovered the tomb. It's arguments like that which seem fairly convincing. I mean, that's a fair point. That's a good point. It's an interesting thing when you're talking about historicity in the Bible. I see people talking a lot of the time. They'll say things like, "Well, look, there are all of these contradictions. There are all of these crazy stories. For instance, the fact that the gospel narratives contradict each other. Like the resurrection narratives. Who discovers the empty tomb? Is it Mary Magdalene? Is it Mary Magdalene along with two other ladies? Is it Mary Magdalene along with one other person? Does John see the tomb before the women do? Do the women see it before John does? All these kinds of inconsistencies. And people say, well, this just shows that the historicity of Jesus is nonsense. But it doesn't, because, again, if somebody were trying to falsify this, there's no way they would have allowed all those contradictions to occur, right? And so it seems that what might be happening is lots of different accounts being kind of thrown together. So what I would say is you can't say that because there are like contradictions that it shows that the Bible must be false through and through, because if it were really fully falsified, they wouldn't have allowed those contradictions in the first place. Wouldn't make any sense. And so all you can really say is that if it is true, then the narratives that we have are untrustworthy. So if you're going to make certain historical claims and slightly untrustworthy but generally agreeable stories, that's kind of okay, because as long as they roughly agree, and as long as the sources are fairly trustworthy, we can get a rough picture. But if you're going to make claims about things like resurrection, then you're going to need to do a little bit better than just about trustworthy sources. You're going to need something a lot more. So I would say that we can't immediately dismiss the idea that there is some kind of historical validity in the life of Jesus and the ministry that's recorded in the four Gospels. However, I would say that under normal circumstances, that still wouldn't be quite enough. And so in extraordinary circumstances, it's certainly not enough. Okay, Mike plays sax, says he has his last A-level tomorrow. How were mine? It doesn't matter how mine were. Get off the stream and go and revise. This will be available after I finish. This will be available tomorrow. Please, for goodness sake, get off the stream. Go and study. That's all I can say. I'm not going to answer your question. I'm not going to encourage you. We have a super chat. We have two. Super Curious, thank you so much. I think, didn't you do a super chat just a moment ago? You've got to stop. Super Curious asks, what are my wants and goals and future endeavours? I kind of spoke about this at the beginning. Not entirely sure. It's going to depend on what's going on with uni. And if you kind of missed what I said about that, then go back to the beginning of the stream. It's definitely going to depend. If I manage to get into university, then the end goal, as far as I'm concerned, is to get a degree. And that's kind of as far as I'm thinking. Obviously, I have long-term plans in terms of growing the channel, collaborating with people, doing events, writing a book, that kind of stuff. But it's going to depend. That stuff's going to come a lot sooner. Like, if I don't go to university, I might be immediately thinking, like, well, let's get to work on a book, or let's get to work on some kind of, I don't know, talking tour or something. But it's going to depend on whether I get into to university. Okay, Professor Stick has just informed me that apparently you can't rewind the stream, which surprises me. I would have thought that you could have done. If you have missed anything from the stream, this video is going to be available after. I think it takes a bit of time to like process or something, but then the video is going to be available. I'll leave it up so then you can rewind. Okay, Nathan Jones, thank you for the £5. Your definition of freedom in the realm of individual rights and government intervention. Yikes. Basically, look, Mill's harm principle, I guess. I'm somewhat of a libertarian in that sense. You know, I struggle with what I would argue is the legitimate role of government. I mean, I can certainly say what the minimal is for the legitimate role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. I mean, that's the basis of government. The extent to which government has more of a need to intervene. It's difficult to say, especially because of like cultural bias. Like, you know, I've grown up with a national health system, you know, and so it's difficult for me to imagine not having socialized healthcare. But I also recognize the arguments that say that socialized healthcare is not ultimately beneficial for either well-being or the economy. But I struggle with it because I would really struggle. You know, I wouldn't want the NHS to disappear in the UK, for instance. But you know, if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician, so to speak. So it's difficult for me to say. What I'm going to say is I'm still on a bit of a so to speak, an intellectual journey, if you'll pardon the phrase, when it comes to uncovering what the role of government is as far as I'm concerned. I've thought about it a lot. I'm still not entirely convinced. I'm hoping that going to university is going to be one of the things that will help me solidify that. That's why I've somewhat avoided talking about it. But I lean more towards libertarian than socialism, for sure. But I couldn't tell you quite where I lie there. I might do one of those online political tests or something, just for some kind of measure that I can point people to, because people ask about that a lot. Thank you. Is that Genesis Lucas? That's kind of you to say. Who's quoting Camus? It just went past me. I saw Mother died today. Yes, GFR Tube. Nice, good one. Okay. I don't know why everybody's so interested in seeing Jerry. I don't know where she is, I'm afraid, so you can't see her. I'll put her on Instagram or something later if you all follow me. See, I'm doing really well with the promotion today. Another super chat. Have you ever considered a gap year? I basically had a gap year. My first year doing A-levels, I did maths, further maths and physics. I didn't do very well. I was a bit of an idiot. I didn't take it very seriously. I like totally screwed up the exams. Again, this is going to be stuff I'll be explaining in a later video. But I kind of count that as my gap year, because although I was at school, I wasn't taking it very seriously and I was kind of just having fun. So that was basically my gap year. It was a stupid way to spend a gap year, but that's basically what I did. But no, I'm not having a gap year as of now. I'm going to be going straight to university if it works out. We'll see. Someone's asked, have I read *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari? I have. I think it's a fantastic book. I really do. It's opinionated where perhaps it shouldn't be. He presents a lot of his interesting opinions, very interesting and well-grounded opinions, but he presents them as though they're facts. I think if he were just a little bit clearer that some of the things he was saying were like conjecture, were opinions that he was coming up with, it would have been a perfect book. But I do think it's a fantastic book, certainly worth reading if you haven't already. Trying to figure out how long I should be doing this for as well, because I'm also aware of the fact that the longer a stream is, the less likely people are going to be watching it. And I didn't really mean to get into a very long and deep Q&A tonight, but you know, you just kind of can't help this. It's really is great fun to be back. Have I ever been to Germany? No, I haven't been to Germany. Well, wait, no, I have been to Germany when I was very young. I don't much remember it, but like I said before, if you want me to go anywhere, contact a local humanist society or something, see if they'll get me out wherever. If they can cover my costs, I'll go there, I'll do a talk or something, whatever you want. Just get them to send me an email. As long as I can and as long as costs can be covered, I'm happy to do it. Thank you, by the way, Drew. I see you still in the comments, kind of answer. If people are asking questions that I've answered before in previous videos, I keep seeing Drew kind of like answering the questions for me. I appreciate that. It's kind of you. Russia. I'd like to go to Russia. That'd be nice. Stay or remain, someone says. They mean the same thing, so I'm afraid I can't answer that question. A lot of people keep saying LGBT. Drew has said this before. I've spoken about this stuff before. You can watch my previous videos. There's not really much to say on the topic as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, just previous videos that I've done on it. They should basically all I have to say. Oh, always. I cannot go a single live stream without one person asking about veganism. Jacob, thank you for asking, because it is an interesting question. As far as I'm concerned, veganism is a moral virtue. If you are able to prevent from causing harm to animals, I mean, and again, careful, morality, subjective, but purely based in subjectivity. You know, I do think it is morally good to avoid killing animals if possible. I'm not a vegan, and I sort of see that as a moral deficiency. I've seen people talk about this before, like Matt Dillahunty has spoken about veganism on the Atheist Experience, and he's tried to kind of defend the idea that it's not really, you can kind of defend the idea of eating meat as moral. I just remained unconvinced. If anybody knows of any good philosophical arguments in favour of eating meat, do email me, let me know, because I'll be really interested in that. Partly because it's one of the most interesting areas of philosophical discourse, but also because I quite like eating meat, and I'd like to do so without feeling so bad. Because if I can't find a good reason to carry on doing it, I'm going to have to be philosophically consistent and eventually become a vegan. There's kind of no way around it. And as far as I'm concerned, eventually eating animal meat will be illegal. I'm not necessarily saying that I want that to be the case. I'm almost certain that that's going to happen. And I think if you're a vegan and you want the world to be a vegan with you, the one place you should put your money is in lab-grown meat, clean meat, so to speak. The moment that clean meat tastes the same as real meat, so to speak, and is available at the same price, is the day that the whole world becomes vegans and doesn't even complain about it. I mean, once that happens, and I think it will. You know, I can see it happening. I mean, at the moment, I think you can probably get a clean meat burger, but it's going to cost you like $100,000. But when you can go to McDonald's and choose between clean meat and real meat, there's going to be a lot of people who choose the real meat. But then eventually there'll be like a cultural shift. More people will be using clean meat than real meat. And then eventually there'll be a movement to ban real meat, and there'll be some really annoyed people, and there'll be some kind of referendum, and eventually it's going to be illegal. I can just see it happening. That's my prediction. Don't know for certain, because we might find some philosophical breakthrough that eating meat is perfectly moral. I just highly doubt it. So, someone says Jordan Peterson argues for eating meat. I haven't looked into that. That's a good idea. I'll see what he has to say on this topic, seeing as he's being described as the most influential most influential public intellectual, or most important public intellectual in the Western-speaking world. What do you guys think about that? I mean, even if you disagree with Jordan Peterson, do you think it's justified to call him like the most consequential, the most influential right now? Because I can see the case for that. I really can. He's just been so explosive in the things that he's saying. So I'd be interested to see who you would consider more influential or consequential right now. Who would you put on top? Because there are people who you find more convincing or you prefer, or who've had a longer career. But I mean, right now, who is the person that if they said something could instantly cause people, could instantly influence people's opinion? I mean, who would you say that is? I think there's a strong case to be made that Jordan Peterson at the moment could fit that bill, because there are other people who've had longer careers and more philosophically endowed, shall we say. But I mean, I've seen a few people saying Richard Dawkins. I don't think so. I mean, Richard Dawkins, he's had a fantastic and long career, but he's not that influential anymore. I mean, if he came out on Twitter and said something outrageous that nobody really agreed with, he's not really going to change very many minds just because of the fact that he said it. But if Jordan Peterson came up and said something, even without justifying it, I think a lot of people would start changing their minds just because he's the one who said it. It's interesting to think about who you would consider the number one. Okay, well, how long have we been here? I think it's been about an hour and 10 minutes, so I think I'm going to jump off. But it's been great fun to... Yeah, it's been great fun to be back. It's good to speak to you guys. I'm sorry if I couldn't get around to sort of answering your questions. I'm really sorry if I missed one of your super chats. I don't know how to check. I'm trying to sort of see if there's a way to do it, but I don't really know what I'm doing. If I missed your super chat, yeah, send me an email. To be honest, I'll speak to you then. But yeah, I'll hopefully have a new video up by this time next week. Not sure quite what it's going to be on yet, but I'm hoping to get something out there. And then hopefully things will be back to normal for the summer, uploading fairly regularly, jumping back into things. I'm glad that there's been a few of you here. I think that they got up to around about 900, 1,000 people watching live, which is good, because it means that people are still here. But keep your eyes out, basically. I just wanted to do this live stream to say, I'm back. Keep your eyes on Twitter, press the bell on the subscription, and just be ready for content to be coming back, because it's going to be coming. So just need a few days to kind of readjust to life that isn't just 24/7 head in a book reading the most boring material in the world. But yeah, it's been fun. So I will see you soon in video format, and I do enjoy doing these live streams, so I might do more in the future, especially for things like milestones. I'm nearly on 200k, so that might be a sort of justification for a live stream. Not entirely sure, but we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm keeping things open for now, so yeah. Well, I will catch you guys in the next one. It's been great fun. Got to figure out how to turn this off now. That's the only thing. There we go. That's how you do it. Fantastic. Right, see you guys.